Just to set the scene, can I ask how many people have heard of Arista Networks? Okay, is that because you work for Arrow, or is that because you've seen the market? Well, there's a good reason I asked the question. Arista is quite unusual in many ways in the way that we structure the company. We are actually a public company now, but to give you one example of that, we were actually profitable with cash in the bank when we went public, which in this day and age is almost unheard of. Another reason that we're different is that we actually spend over 30% of our revenue on R&D and only 15% on sales and marketing. Typically, technology companies invest entirely the opposite way. That means we've got great technology, but it means that we need forums like this to get in front of people and to mention the name. We recently took over the alias Arista.com. We were originally AristaNetworks.com. And that means now that we get 10 or 15 hip-hop bands every day applying to us to see whether we'll distribute their music and content. But in brief summary, we're an Ethernet switching company, but an Ethernet switching company entirely focused on the modern data center and the challenges in the modern data center. We were formed back in 2004, but didn't start shipping in 2008. We spent 4 years under the radar developing this platform. But uniquely, we are the only vendor that started in the 21st century with the concept of cloud and that term SDN, software-defined networking, whatever you want to term it, when that was actually in people's psyche. So quite a different organization from most of our competitors. But again, Ethernet switching vendor for the modern data center. We don't do wireless, we don't do wide area network, we do Ethernet in the data center. Today we've got over 1,000 customers, over 2,500 customers, over 1,000 employees. And probably one of the most important things is these 2 points here. Firstly, we're widely deployed in 7 out of the 8 cloud titans out there. So those big, typically West Coast organizations driving hyperscale data center build-outs. But we're also very widely deployed in the service provider community, and obviously that's the focus of today. I've just realized nobody told me how to advance the slides.
Press the arrow down now.
This one?
The
there we go. So without giving you a war and peace on the background to Arista, if you want credibility of Arista as an organization, it's important to know that you've actually been tracking our senior execs for a long period of time. Mr. Bechtolsheim, he was the founder of Sun Microsystems back in the day, so if you use Sun, and obviously to a certain extent Oracle today, Andy was the founder of that organization. He then went on to, so most of you, I guess, have heard of Sun Microsystems. If you haven't, you've probably come from a networking background, and you've probably come across what is now the CAT 4500, where Andy founded a company called Granite, which he sold to Cisco, that became the catalyst for 4,500. If you've not heard of either of those two organizations, then you will have heard of Google. And he was the first guy to put any money into Google and to found the company. So one way or another, you've been tracking his career. And whilst he's clearly made a considerable amount of money over the years, what he is an out-and-out engineer and widely seen as a visionary within the industry. Another point of reference, clearly there's the 800-pound gorilla on the street in terms of networking. Most people use Cisco in some shape or form and will continue to do. But it's interesting to note, while we might not be the biggest brand out there, we're a clear number 2 in terms of data center switching on a global basis. So again, might not be the biggest brand you've ever come across, but very, very widely deployed and utilized across the data center infrastructure. If you want to the reference point, Arista is the furthest right of all the switching vendors in terms of the Magic Quadrant. And also, I could show a comparison of the last year and this year. Arista is the only vendor with an upward and right trajectory in terms of the Gartner profile as well. Every other vendor is either moving down or backwards in terms of that infrastructure, and particularly Cisco, who last year were rated up there. The interesting thing about this is it's the first ever Magic Quadrant, I believe, that's ever been published with nobody in the top right quadrant. And the reason for that is this is such a rapidly growing, rapidly changing market and an environment that at the moment there is a certain amount of concern about, you know, where all this will lead to. In terms of install base, we've got a broad range of customers across pretty much every line of business. We're behind most of the major clouds out there. Just to provide a little bit of focus, I am running at a bit of a pace. We are outside if you want to talk to us in any more detail. I'm just really conscious that we get you in front of the alcohol that you've been promised as quickly as possible. But in terms of the service provider reference, it's interesting, the slide before, there's a lot of consistency between our references as well. We're the vendor of choice for Colt in their latest cloud deployment worldwide. And if you're interested, we've got a really nice case study explaining why Colt made that decision to work with Arista and VMware to roll out this infrastructure to provide greater agility, faster time to market to make them more competitive in that space. Equally, the whole of the EMC storage cloud is based on Arista, as is the VMware cloud, Rackspace widely deployed, Swisscom. I could go on. So hopefully what I'm getting across is, whilst you might not have heard of us, we are a very well proven, very well utilized company. A great thing. Just to really focus on the challenges that we perceive in the data center and the relevance of the change in the data center. I think this slide really sums it up perfectly without giving too much away. That's a large financial services organization. This is one of the large cloud titans. Okay? It's interesting to note, cloud titans, those 8 companies, are responsible for virtually 30% of global data center spend between the 8 companies. So whether you like it or not, these guys are driving where the industry's going. You can try and go against them, or you can go with them. Now, what we're not saying here is that you have to follow exactly what they do. But if you can pick up on some of the nuances of how they approach their data center infrastructures, it can have massive implications on the cost of infrastructure, on your competitiveness in the market space. So this is actually eBay. So 800,000 servers, 5 engineers running on a shift basis supporting that infrastructure. Okay, you know, the cost base is dramatic. What's behind that? It's all the automation that they build into their infrastructure, so that they don't have to configure a switch when they deploy it. It just automatically configures itself. If you make the wrong connections on it, it tells you made the wrong connections and points out where you should make the right connections. They tie in the applications and services with the storage and the servers and the network into a single entity that they can manage as a single entity. That's how they create the competitive edge that clearly they have. And just to summarise in some of those cases, this is really what we see in terms of the major changes from the issues of cloud scale. And again, we're not saying that you have to build it in exactly the same way as eBay or Microsoft, whatever. But what you can do is you can learn from their experiences, you can learn from their approach to make yourself more competitive, more agile, and more successful in the market as a whole. But no longer do they build a single infrastructure per application that they're hosting. They just build a single infrastructure, what they call a universal infrastructure, that's capable of hosting and supporting any type of application that the customer might need. They always use open technologies. The idea of non-standards based technologies is alien to them. They will not deploy anything that is not supported across multiple vendors. Rather interestingly, whilst we would love to be the sole vendor of choice across all those cloud titans, we never are. They always dual source. They always keep themselves open to at least 2 vendors because it keeps them competitive. But equally, it means that they have to follow the standards so they can mix and match technologies as and when they need to use them. And obviously, avoid vendor lock-in. They clearly don't want to have multiple management stations. They want a single management station to be able to manage this entire infrastructure. And that's not just across physical infrastructure, you know, your switches, your routers, your firewalls. It's right up and down the stack as well, whether your virtualization platforms, your server platforms, etc. And finally, as you could expect, the simpler the infrastructure, the cheaper it is, the quicker it is for them to deploy, and the cheaper it is for them to support on an ongoing basis. And so this is what they build. They build a single, what they call universal infrastructure, where they're offering storage services, which tend to require buffering capabilities that other applications don't need. Then they can cater for that. If they're offering services into the financial services community, where latency tends to be quite critical, they can cater for that as well. But what they're not doing is they're not building individual applications for individual services, because that becomes a model that simply is not competitive. And this is where Arista really helps those guys. So I was not going to mention any products, but I thought I'd throw some product information in there. Basically, we build big switches, small switches, and all switches in between. Okay. The nice thing is we have a single operating system that covers all of them. So what that means is it doesn't matter whether you're the hyperscale, Microsoft, eBay, or one of those organizations, or you're starting your cloud service with two racks in a hosted data center. We have a platform that offers consistent services irrespective of size and nature. So you can really, take advantage of Arista and scale with you, rather than thinking that maybe we're high end and out of your league. we really do provide those, that breadth of capability across all our platforms.